is my absolute pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Matt Church. He is a leadership expert, founder and chairman of Thought Leaders and author of over a dozen leadership books. Today we have invited Mr. Matt Church to share some thoughts on why we are all leaders and why leadership matters more now than at any other time in our lives. Get ready to be entertained, inspired, and maybe a little uncomfortable. Please welcome our next speaker, Mr. Matt Church.
Oh, yay. Oh my goodness, I wish I had that level of applause while I'm standing behind a Zoom recording. What a production this is. It's fantastic to be here. Now, my beautiful friend Mukesh has organized for me to be here. Let's bring Mukesh up for a sec, just so that everybody can see the two of our beautiful faces together. Come on, team. Bring the amazing Mukesh up. Are you there, my friend?
Yes. Hi, Matt. Thanks a lot for taking time and being with us today.
My pleasure. And I love the role you've played of trying to segue and be the voice of the audience. And I want to encourage as many people today as possible, as thoughts come up for them during today's presentation, that they post them in the chat. And then anytime you want to just wave and interrupt me, you do, because we'll make this as interactive as we can. I know that everybody's been sitting for a long time. Now, before I get underway, is there anything you want to say? Is there anything you want to give me some direction or thoughts? I know you and I have spent a lot of time together.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would like to share, not just with you, with the entire audience, is the simple fact that, I've known you for more than a year now. And I think the insights that you share are really very, very useful and helpful. I would like to request the audience to use this opportunity, ask whatever questions that come up for you. Perfect. As you hear Matt. And Matt, from an audience perspective, I think it'll be really great if you can touch upon leadership, which I know is your message and your calling, and why it is important that every one of us steps up and be a leader. So,
okay, Mukesh,
thank you so much.
That sounds like a perfect brief. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for organizing it. And it's a big shout out to everybody out there, wherever you are. In the chat, let me know all the different places you are. I'd love to read it on the live feed and track some of you. Show team, send Mukesh away. I wish it was this easy with all of my life. And you are all looking just at me. So my name is Matt. I do live in Sydney, Australia. And if you get a chance to come here, please, we'd love to see you anytime. And I'm sure many of you have been here a lot of times as well. For the next few minutes or so, what I'm going to talk about is the topic of leadership. And it's kind of all I've sort of talked about for decades. All of my books are digitally free. And Mukesh is just going to share a link in the chat for how you can download my books. And that's because I fundamentally believe that I'm in the experience business, not the idea business. And I think it's an interesting challenge in times of uncertainty as you lead other organizations through transformation, and particularly digital. And I'm linking to this previous session and that final question that Mukesh was asking. If you're trying to get someone on board with a new paradigm, with a new idea, and you're trying to take them from the place they are to a better place, which is what the digital transformation agenda is, it's rarely about the content. And it's nearly always about the context. So if you're taking notes, they are two of the first words I'd love you to kind of sit with. What's the difference between content, which is the stuff, it's the matter, and context, which is the big picture? Because transformation is delivered through content and detail, but the influence agenda occurs through context or big picture. And being able to run the meta and the matter, the big picture and the detail, becomes one of your superpowers as an influencer. But before we go any further, Mukesh has charged me to talk about leadership. So that's what I'm going to talk about to make sure that everybody's switched on. And first of all, I called up my business partner in Dubai, Prakash Menon, and I say he's from Kerala and his mother was a Bollywood star. And I said, Prakash, as I come into this presentation, what should I be thinking about? And he says, well, you should be thinking about the definition of leadership and how, for many people around the world, leadership is positional, and that it is like a status and it is a position on an org chart. And the leadership that I'm about to talk about is a slightly different leadership. It's called dispositional. So it's more about the decision to lead than it is a position. And if you were tracking that grammatically, I would say leadership is a verb and not a noun. And yet when most people think about the idea of leader, they make it an object or a position or a title. And I'm saying, no. This is a living, active idea. And I know that this program's been heavy on the concept of digital transformation, and so it should be, because that's your business. But I'm going to talk a little bit about human-centered leadership as being a core capability to driving digital transformation, because in business, we're always dealing with people. And if you are in the digital transformation arena, you can occasionally, without stereotyping or prototyping everybody in that industry, possibly be more committed to the implementation of the transformation than the inspiration towards it. And this is not just a sales agenda. This is also for those who are on the ground implementing transformation. You need to be able to get above the stuff. You've got to rise sort of above the forest, sort of above the trees, and see the whole forest. So we're going to talk a little bit about perspective. But let's talk first of all, every time I teach, and a lot of the material for this presentation today is in my gold book, and my books are like candy. They're all colored. So you can, the red one, the green one, the pink one, and this is the gold one. And in the gold one, Rise Up, I talk a little bit about the decision to lead and this idea of what is an evolution in leadership, because as technology becomes more ubiquitous as a result of the work you all do, one of the things we're noticing is that the human component of human-centered leadership becomes critical. All right, so every time I do this sort of thing, I get a question. That's almost every time. And the question is, and it's a good one to ask you as a group, are leaders born or are leaders made? Now, here's the thing. That question has a trick assumption in it. So you should never answer the question, because the question itself is designed with a deceptive cadence. All right. And the assumption, and it's a very, very interesting thing, because it's an assumption that leadership is a position. It's not. It's not. And you know this. I'm going to give you an example. If you have ever been on a holidays with a 4-year-old, all right, anybody ever been on holidays with a 4-year-old child? All right. Who's the leader of the holiday? Because we know on the org chart of the holiday, it's whoever organized the holiday, ostensibly. The positional leader is the person who's, I organized the holiday, I booked it, I chose the hotel, I'm the leader of this holiday. Yeah, nah. Because the 4-year-old determines whether you stay at the restaurant, which restaurant you go to, whether you stay by the pool, and if so, for how long. And if you're going to go on an adventure, well, the 4-year-old's going to dictate it, because the 4-year-old is effectively the energetic leader of the family on holidays. And this is something that leads us to this concept of leaderful organizations. So if a leader is a position and it's a noun and it's on an org chart and at the top, that's not human-centered leadership. That's post-industrial revolution manufacturing leadership. But if you're in digital transformation, if you're on the leading edge of technology making things better for working and life, the human condition better at work and at life, then you actually are at the heart of a human-centered decision. And we know this to be true, because when we're solving problems, as Neelan just said beginning, if we're solving the problems that our clients have, then you'll find the uptake for transformation to be much greater. So I really can't go on unless everybody who is listening goes, all right, okay, I'm a leader, you're a leader, everybody's a leader. And then someone goes, well, someone's got to make the decisions around here. So that's a nice thing to say, but it's not how it works in practice. And I go, here's the rub. One of the things that we're noticing as we sort of have 3 great challenges, right? We're in a race for the future. Yeah. We're in a battle for attention, and we're up against the war for talent. And COVID has made that even worse. Because people, you've heard of the Great Resignation, people are saying, you know what, I don't want to work this way anymore. I don't want to work the way I have been. I don't want to work for you. And we know statistically that talent doesn't leave companies. Talent leaves leaders. Right? It leaves the lack of leaders. So here's our three big challenges: the race for the future. And guess what digital transformation is doing? It's trying to give us the competitive advantage to win the future. The second thing that's happening across organizations all over the world is the battle for attention. And those of you who are trying to sell in this sort of highly competitive marketplace that you're in, you know this battle for attention is ridiculous. And the key is to get your insights, to get your thought leaders in front of your market, because what they do is they take you above the mediocrity. But to have thought leaders in your business, you've got your third challenge, which is the war for talent. And people have been talking about the war for talent since the year 2000. It's been decades it's going on. But it used to be, make it a nice place to work and they'll be happy. Then it used to be, so give them a coffee machine in the corner. And that would be how we get our talent to stay. And then it used to be, give them more money. Well, Wolf of Wall Street, Gordon Gekko, here we go. But one of the things we've identified is super talented people, and Boston Consulting did a fabulous study on this, are not motivated only by pay and position. So mediocre people, they want more money and more status. Now, highly talented people want money and status, but they are 5 and 4 of their priorities. The top 3 things they want, right? Number 3 that highly talented people want, and this is why you matter as a leader, because you will not win the war for talent. You will not attract the thought leaders that you can then use as insight marketing to help you outcompete the competition and win the battle for attention. And you can't do that unless you understand how to attract and retain some of these really talented people. Right? So everybody wants money and everybody wants a better position, but that's 5 and 4 in a priority for high potentials and for talents. Number 3, what they want is self-directed learning. What this means is don't put them in a course, give them a budget to educate themselves. And the example of Steve Jobs dropping out of university, but his mum had paid for the year, so he just wandered into lecture halls. And one of the lecture halls that he wandered into was a calligraphy class. Fountain pen calligraphy class. And many of you know that the origin of fonts, certainly from the Mac platform and that user interface, came from a lot of that original work, that original sideways adjacent learning of Steve Jobs when he was even at university. So high potentials, they don't necessarily want to put in another compliance course where they've got to sit through death by PowerPoint and run through a procedure checklist. We know that's necessary at some level, but highly talented people will want self-directed learning. All right, second thing, so you get that's like, so they want more pay, sure, 5. They want a better position, better status, 4. They want self-directed learning, 3. They want recognition as an individual for the projects that they've worked on. So they want to be recognized as individuals, not as collectives, because they're working with a lot of people that could be a bit mediocre. And so giving a general praise is not the thing to do. You want to be really, really specific. But the number one thing that high potentials want is they want to be inspired by the company they keep. So that's a bit of pressure on you. Because what that means is they're leaving you. And that means that you may not be as inspiring as you need to be. Now, here's the trick. The trick to being inspiring is not rah-rah. It's not rhetoric. It's not you talking at me. The key is you being lit up about your learning and creating the conditions where I can learn too. Now, my learning hero, one of the gentlemen that I'm really inspired by, is a Kenyan. His name is Julius Yago. And Julius Yago is the Kenyan world record holder for throwing a javelin. And people go, all right, so big deal. People get world records all the time. And so he's the Kenyan record holder. He's a Commonwealth Games record holder. He's not the person that's thrown it the longest in the world. So this is him here. Hello, come on back in. There we go. Here's Julius Yago. And the beautiful Julius Yago has thrown a javelin 92.72 meters. And people go, okay, well, that's interesting. Thanks for sharing that story, Matt, about Julius Yago. What's your point? 3 years before this moment, 3 years before this moment, had never held a javelin. Now, 3 years. I would like to see a lot more surprise on everybody's face, because I want to say he didn't just get a little bit good. All right. He is the best thrower of a javelin in Africa, on the continent of Africa. And you go, that's extraordinary. All right. But people are still not impressed. I can tell you're not impressed. Like, the chat's not going off. So here's what I know about Julius Yago is he didn't have a coach. Not only did he not pick up a javelin, but he did not have a coach 1,000 days before this moment. So in the 3 years leading up to this moment, prior to the 1,000 days, did not have a coach and had not touched a javelin. In fact, for most of those 1,000 days, he didn't. He had to have a coach to be in the Kenyan national team. So for about 6 weeks, just before he achieved this record, he had a coach. What's remarkable about Julius is he taught himself, and I think, and unless anyone can find another example for me, I think he's the first example of someone in a biomechanical kinesthetic activity like golf or cricket or throwing a javelin, who's taught himself how to do it on YouTube. So every lesson that Julius got was from watching other people throw javelins before he even held one, and he never got a coach. I still tell you, not as surprised as you should be. And that's the point being is he didn't get a little bit good. He's extraordinary. And he was self-taught. And this is an example of a fundamental digital transformation. It's happened also in Stanford University. Many of you know Professor Thrun and Turig, who put together the robotics course, so Robotics 101 for robotic engineering at Stanford. Normally they would get 60 students, Ivy League type kids, privileged with lots of money and really good scores to get in. They put it online, and in the first year, it went from 60 kids in a course to 60,000 people on a MOOC, so a massive online open learning university. Now, this is an old story, but what's quite extraordinary about it is it revolutionized the business model of Stanford, because you couldn't get the unit certificate unless you did the exams. And you couldn't get the exams if you didn't pay to do the course. They took what was privileged and exclusive and small to 60. They put it through a digital transformation against the vice chancellor. The vice chancellor didn't want them to do this. And they got 50%, right? So 30,000 of the 60,000 paid for the course. So I just want to give you the business case beforehand. 60 people pay. They put it online, 30,000 people pay. That digital transformation was extraordinary, but it couldn't be adopted in the old Stanford University. And so they went and started Audacity, and the rest is history. One of the world's greatest online universities. Doesn't have the prestige of, Oxford, doesn't have the prestige of Cambridge. Actually, yes, because if all you've got is a master's degree from your university, employers are going, show me some other initiative. Did you do a Udacity course on this to improve your skills in maybe big data interpretation or whatever it might be? And so we're starting to see candidates breaking out of the bricks and mortar university learning through a digital transformation that was a digital renegade, broke out and had to go. Professor Thrun and Turig, extraordinary individuals who basically believe that they weren't getting smart enough students at their courses. And so they said, we have to open source this to get smarter students into our program so that robotics can go to the next phase. A wonderful case story in digital transformation, but also about an industry's education, universities, reluctance to adopt it. And yet the paradigm of change is extraordinary. So you've all got stories like this traveling through your world. My point being, the talent want to be inspired, number one, by what you're learning. They don't want you to teach them the way it used to be when you were getting ready, that old-fashioned kind of stuff. What they want you to do is be lit up about something. They want you to find a story like Udacity, like Professor Thrun and Turig. They want you to share that story because they want to see. They almost want to, and contagious is a word I can't say much at the moment with the way the world is, but they want to catch your enthusiasm for knowledge and insight. And if you can build a learning-centered organization, you're on a long way, really doing a really primary job of attracting the best and brightest to come and work with you. And it's about creating the conditions where we are inspired by the company we keep. All right. If we were around a table or in a Zoom, I'd send you into breakout rooms right now. I'd get you to rate yourself on how inspiring do you reckon you are. I would then want to ask everybody around you, are you actually inspiring? And then what I would want to do is I want you to take a moment and realize that you're not inspiring based on the example you set with what you did 6 years ago. You're inspiring by the knowledges and insights that you're generating in this present moment, right now, fully recent and absolutely up to date. So the decision to be a leader is the decision to be in action, to be in verb, right? Not in noun, not to be so caught up in the position that you get all comfortable, assume respect, talk to people in a boring way and think that that's going to engage and enroll them. What you're going to find is talented people won't stay very long for that, no matter how much you pay, no matter how much you promote them, because when we get to the top 5 that Boston Consulting said high potentials want, that idea of being inspired by the company we keep becomes one of the critically important ones. And I think, isn't that just a better way to work? Wouldn't we rather work in environments where we are inspired by all the different people we're with? So the decision to lead is the decision to stay in inspiration, not just instruction and not just command and control. Peter Senge wrote a book called The Learning Organization, or The Fifth Discipline. This is like 30 years old. Archaeologists study dead societies. Anthropologists study living societies and cultures. And anthropologically, we understand that we've only ever wanted 3 things from our leaders. And this is a really good set to jot down. How you feeling, Mukesh? Are we feeling live? Are we feeling good?
I think so.
Good. Well, we are live. Thank you. I just got the confirmation from the team, which is great. So in this space, the 3 things that we've always wanted from our leaders are, number 1, wherever there is fear, replace it with confidence. And if I were sitting with you as a leader, thanks, Mukesh. If I was sitting, we've got the beautiful Mukesh on screen, which is great, and he's very welcome, and I do like to see his face, but you can also zoom in on me if you want, is that whenever there's fear in an organization, which used to be the way people led in the old days, that fear had a command and control top-down vibe. And for a lot of us who grew up with an authoritarian parent figure or examples of that in leadership, we still think that's the way to attract and retain talent. And it's actually not. And I get that there's cultural sensitivities around this all over the planet, but I do believe that talent's talent. And I believe that one of the things that talent wants as much as anything is they want autonomy, they want mastery, and they want control. And those 3 things, autonomy, mastery, and control, are things that Dan Pink talks about in his book Drive. And it's a really good thing to sort of read, even if you just read a quick sort of book summary version of it, because you'll actually be able to access the fact that talent globally doesn't have, even through cultural differences, doesn't have a difference with regards to those top 5 drivers, and doesn't have a difference with regards to its desire for autonomy, mastery, and control. So how you command 1,000 people that don't want to work for you to do things might be very different, but how you command the talented people you need to be running digital transformation businesses or deploying digital transformation projects, that's a whole different game altogether. So the first thing is fear down, confidence up. The second thing we've wanted from our leaders forever is wherever there's confusion, could you replace it with certainty? Could you give us the composure of your conviction? And rather than convincing me everything's going to be okay, stand in the conviction that reassures me, so that you're like the captain on the bridge holding the wheel of the boat while the storm is rocking all around us, and that you're completely okay and fabulous in that position. So number 1, wherever there's fear, fear down, confidence up. And it's worth rating yourself. When you're in a team meeting, are people more afraid or less afraid? Because in the hunt for accountability, one of the things we sometimes do is use fear as the way of driving results. And the problem with it is it's short term, and talented people won't stay in those conditions because their creative frontal cortex can't be engaged when the amygdala response in the back of the brain kicks in. So if they're at all innovative, if they're at all creative, if they at all have an autonomous ability to get up and get things done, which is what you want, they're not going to respond to fear. They're not. And that's not a generational idea like, oh, millennials, they need to be motivated to be engaged. It's not that at all. It's actually just pure brain anatomy that highly creative people cannot be creative when they're scared on an internal space. So fear down, confidence up, confusion down, conviction up. But the third thing we've always wanted from our leaders is we want you to mobilize us in pursuit of a better future. All right? Because if things aren't changing, then you're managers, managing processes and systems. But when we lead people, the status quo becomes the enemy. And what we're trying to do is create conditions for growth, conditions for change. Do you remember 20 years ago when we used to have change management projects? And how ridiculous is it that we would have to manage change? What I love is that as an audience, you're so on the leading edge with digital transformation that I imagine this third requirement, mobilize us in pursuit of a better future, that third requirement for leadership is baked in to your value proposition, isn't it? It's baked into what all of you are doing and why we're here having this conference, right? It's about transformation and we're right at the leading edge. So the question I would want to ask you is, if anthropology's been studying leadership, what are the lessons that they've identified? What makes a great leader? Because we know we need those things from a leader, but what are the behaviors? And they found three. My friend Michael Henderson has written a number of books on values at work and culture, and he's a colleague and a brother, so you can check out his work beautifully. But when we were talking about chiefing your tribe, we realized there are three conditions we need for high performance business, right? And the first is we need work worth doing, right? So to some extent, if you don't feel like what you do matters, if you don't feel like what you're doing is making a difference, then you would say, my work isn't work that matters. But for all of us on this conference today, because the things we're doing are making better futures, because that's the heart of the digital transformation game, then the work matters. So tick, like we can tick that box. The second thing we need is cultures worth belonging to. And the third is leaders worth following. So let's break down the leaders worth following and the cultures worth belonging to, because I think this is key to how leadership integrates with the performance of your organization. So let's pretend that before organizations, there were chiefs. So the chief was like the head of the community, the village, the whatever it might be that was the place. And anthropologists say that the chief does three things every day. Three things every day, all day long. I was working in the educational sector with school principals and headmasters and headmistresses, and Deloitte had done a study of the 41 moments in a school headmaster's life during their day, 41 touch points where they demonstrate leadership. And they were rating them like, what is their impact on leadership? And it was 2 times, 1.5 times. And so if a leader did these things, basically it took the pressure off management. Right? So leadership, really good. But one of these things had a 10x impact. This is a Deloitte study on school principals. And they tried to identify, they said, wow, this one is 10 times the impact of any of the other things. So if I asked you, if we were in a room, list out 41 things that you think a school principal or headmistress could do that would be leadership, not management, not technically teaching, that would be leadership. But of all of these things that they identified, one of them stood out by 10x. In other words, do this one thing, you don't have to do the others. Now, it's not that you wouldn't do the others, but wow, like superpower skill. And what do you reckon it was? Hey, Mukesh, what do you reckon it was? This is a tough one.
No, I think it,
You don't have to be right. I mean, they came up with 41.
no, I think one skill that which would have a significant outsized impact was the ability to see the forest for the trees. Maybe.
Perspective is an absolute superpower. It was absolutely a big skill. I'd give you a round of applause, but you're not going to get the prize because it wasn't that. It was, believe it or not, saying hello to the children at the start and the end of the day. Now, I don't know how kids would go to school, wherever everybody is, but where I am, the cars drive up, the door opens, the child is taken out and straight into the school, which is extraordinary. And so they're saying that the one thing, and they couldn't understand, why did this have such a big impact? And it turns out when they went to anthropologists, they said, of course. And they're going, well, what do you mean, of course? And they said, the number one job of the chief, the number one job through all history is to greet with intent. Greet with intent. I love that. I love that. I love it. You know, you and I were talking once about like namaste and namaskar, the whole idea of like greeting with intent, that idea that it's like the God in me sees the God in you and the acknowledgement of the Brahman and all this kind of stuff and how powerful that is. That's a greeting with intent. No? It's not a, oh, yes, I've seen you already today. Goodbye. And it's as you walk through the office, busy. I'm very busy. I've got lots of transformation projects on. I'm very busy. I'm going to my office to talk about I'm going to look at my whiteboard and plan my transformation projects. When in fact, the ability to greet with intent, which is the acknowledgement of the human in front of you, could be the smartest thing you do as a leader. In fact, I know I'm in a leaderful company when I walk in based on the number of people who go out of their way to say hello to the stranger. The number of people who stand up, look at me, acknowledge me and say, hello, welcome. Can I help you in any way? And that idea of just being well met and being greeted. If you said, so I'm a leader, then I need to be the person that says hello first. I need to be the person who smiles first. I need to be the person who says something encouraging first. And that greeting with intent is that you really mean it when you do it, because we can feel when you're sincere and when you're not. Thank you to everybody. We've got Mukesh still on screen. It's lovely to have him. We'll flick back just to me. He's doing a great job of keeping me company as I talk to all of you and interacting through this. So the second thing that chiefs do, so the first thing is to look at the quality of how you say hello to people. And this is more than just hi. It's actually the quality of the interaction when you greet people. The second thing that we want from our chiefs is that they start the fire every day. And this is a metaphor for culture. And you remember when I was talking about my friend Michael and the three things we need: work worth doing, cultures worth belonging to, leaders worth following, and that leaders are chiefs. And I'm going to encourage you to sort of embody your chiefness, like step into the role, the ancient artifact anthropological role of chiefing. Like take it seriously, like show up as chief, greet with intent, be the one that says hello to people. The second thing is you start the fire every day. So let's say I was to come into your staff room or your meeting room, and quite often I'm brought in to sort of look at a team's performance. And I'm going to look to see whether this team is toxic or not. And toxic tribes are going to have three things. And this is like the three things that are putting out the fire of culture. And I want you to sort of go with me on a journey a little bit of sort of behavioral science. And we're going to look at sociology as well. And I'm going to explain the underpinning reasons that sit behind why we do these as humans and why you as a leader need to watch out for them. My friend Peter Baines is a forensic policeman who was in PP Beach on the straight after the Boxing Day tsunami, doing the disaster victim identification. So they go onto the beach, they find the bodies, they identify them, and they repatriate them. 3,000 people died that morning on PP Beach. And he had no authority. and he had no resources. And there were all these international forensic groups who turned up to, the Germans, everyone from India, from all these different places, taking their citizens back home. And he explained to me how he ended up building orphanages, and for the 15 years since, he's gone to do all kinds of things to help out in Thailand. And he's written a great book called Doing Good by Doing Good. So for those that have got a corporate social responsibility agenda, that could be something that you want to look at. He believes, by the way, that experience is the key to corporate social responsibility, not contribution. So it's not financial contributions and money. It's the sense that you were able to have an experience and contribute through your experience, not through your economics. And he's telling me about the tsunami warning buoys, that these are signal detectors that they put out in the oceans because they don't want a tsunami to surprise the islands again. And they're at 3 levels. Early warning, which says, look, there's been a seismic event. The waves are rising, but we don't know whether they're going to hit land. There's a second one, which is closer to land, that says, look, this one is on a trajectory to hit land. I want everyone into a warning status. The third one says it is time to get to high ground. Get out, get out, get out. And these 3 things that kill the fire of culture sit like this. Gossip sits as the early warning sign. So gossip is what happens when you and I talk about someone who's not here. And it's an indicator. The swell is rising. If I see a team who gossip in the corridors, who talk about people who aren't there, I know that the leaders have abdicated or are absent. They might be leaders in noun, but they're not leaders in verb. They're leaders in position, but they're not leading dispositionally. And when you've been promoted within your team and the people that were your colleagues now work for you, one of the first things that happens is you have to stop participating in gossip. Now, the reason we like gossip is it creates a sense of belonging, but it breaks the first rule of management, which is no triangles. Talk to, not about. And so as you step up into your leadership, gossip has to disappear. You can't take it out of your organization because humans love to gossip to belong. That's not your problem. Your problem is just to not participate in it. So first thing, early warning buoy. Has there been a shift? Has there been a seismic event? Are there gossips? And if there are, make sure you're not one of them. The second warning buoy is sarcasm. Now, sarcasm is basically breaking the second rule of management. The second rule of management is praise in public, criticize in private. And what sarcasm is it's using humor and your position of authority to course correct or criticize in public another person. And as leaders, sarcasm is not a tool you can ever use. If you want to take the fire of enthusiasm and culture out of your team, gossip about people that aren't there and use sarcasm as leadership. But gossip was how we create belonging. So we understand, as social animals, why that's developed. So what's sarcasm about? It's the tool we use. Every advanced society that survives has to deal with narcissism somehow. And sarcasm is one of the ways we've done that. So what sarcasm is it's developed as the way of going, hey, you're not as good as you think you are, sit back down. And it's when someone's being a little bit too full of themselves, what we have the opportunity is sarcasm is a social slap. But it doesn't work in our contemporary environments. It doesn't work if we want to have good emotional intelligence and good human-centered leadership. So what you want to do is you want to criticize in private and praise in public. So there's zero tolerance for sarcasm. And if you want to create humility, that's done in a mentoring role, not in a classroom role, where you're one-on-one with someone saying, are you aware that this might come across like this? And having the opportunity to actually encourage people into their best version of themselves. So gossip is the first warning buoy of the tsunami of culture that is going to destroy your culture and put out your fire. The second one is sarcasm. And we understand why, right? This is for belonging and this is for humility. But the third one, cynicism, is one I worry about with highly technically competent staff. So if you've got staff that are well educated and extraordinarily good problem solvers, and deep thinkers who are willing to work on wicked problems, not distracted by social media. They're willing to get down deep into code. They're willing to sort of map out complex change transformations, digital transformations. I go, look, the problem with cynicism is it's a result of you and the way you lead. And I don't blame you. This is a society problem. So a skeptic is fabulous. I love skeptics because a skeptic will listen to something like my session and they'll go, I do not love nor hate this yet. Make your case, fella, and I'll see. So I love a skeptic. I come from a family of engineers and researchers and scientists. I could not have been bred on anything but skeptic cornflakes. So I was raised on skeptic. But the problem is a cynic is a skeptic who's given up, but hasn't yet shut up. And what they end up doing is they end up dragging your culture. So gossip, that's not so bad. Sarcasm, come on. But cynicism, that's the stuff that you just can't get through. It's like the penguins on the Madagascar movie. You know what I mean? They're sitting in a meeting and they just smile and wave. But the minute you leave, there is no engagement and no accountability to anything you talked about. And you're like, why are we not getting progress? Why are we not getting traction? And it's because, and I'm going to lay this on your feet, but it might be at your predecessors. It's because the conditions you've created are ones where differences of opinion are not welcome. Now, I want to talk about this a little bit because this is a big social thing. It's a big thing. We've got an outrage culture at the moment where everybody around the world on social media is expressing themselves, whether they're informed or not. And we've lost the art of debate, the ability to disagree well. And it's ended up that people have taken positions of right and wrong instead of entering into good faith discussion where our conversation might generate something. Now, if you're a systems thinker, and I know like 98% of you must be in this audience, then you understand the emergent quality that is a result of divergent thinking, right? This is just systems language, right? We diverge before we converge, and in between. So what we do is we brainstorm before we decide. But in between the brainstorm and the decision, the divergence and the convergence should be something new emerges. But it's not going to emerge if you keep shutting people down. And if your way is the only way. So it ends up being critically important that we remove cynicism by developing what Stephen Fry's, the comedian, talks about when he says, people go to Oxford not to get a degree. They go to Oxford to develop the Oxford manner, which is the ability to disagree gracefully. Now, Professor Linda Hill from Harvard has written a book called Collective Genius that talks about the key to have of creative abrasion in high potential teams. And it's like one of the three pillars of Pixar, of any of the highly successful businesses you want to pick. She identified 10. I think that collective genius is, and her work is what Good to Great isn't anymore. So Jim Collins' Good to Great is a fabulous book, really well, good to read, so many great principles in it. But collective genius is the companies that she's profiled are the top 10 in the world now. And she's noticed that a lot of them have this creative problem solving, design thinking, the stuff that's in your digital transformation businesses, right? And creative abrasion, the ability to disagree and for it to be okay, is a trick. It is a skill as a leader to be able to create those conditions. Ed Catmull, who runs Pixar, wrote a book called Creativity Inc., which is basically the Pixar case study for Professor Hill's book, Collective Genius. You put those two together and you'll know he's got Buzz Lightyear on the cover because they do the Toy Story movie. But he's saying how they do those three things, one of them being creative abrasion, just to put us out of our misery. The second is a marketplace of ideas. So lots of people generating lots of ideas. And the third is iterative disclosure. Now, that's bloody big words for show me your stuff when it's not finished. And instead of people holding it back and then coming out with a big ta-da, look what we've done, they're saying high-performing organizations don't do that. What they do is they have a marketplace of ideas. like lots of people talking lots of ideas all the time. They have iterative disclosure where they'll show things when they're not ready because it's safe enough to do that, right? And then the third thing is that they engender creative abrasion, which is they allow people to debate and discuss and still walk off the sporting field as friends, not enemies, right? To walk off the competitive thinking environment, knowing that, oh, wasn't that great? We really tested and stretched. So good faith, collective decision-making and collective sense-making become new ideas for you. Now I need to check in with my timing. Mukesh, how am I running? Am I at the point where I need to sort of, because I'll stay here and talk forever.
I think we still have about 10 minutes, 10 to 15
Perfect.
minutes to go. Yeah.
Perfect. Then I can bring this home and make it make sense. Okay, so let's check in. If you're still with me, you're doing great because I know it's been a big day. So the first thing is that leadership is a verb, not a noun, right? It's a decision, not a position. And the 4-year-old on holidays gives us an example of what energetic leadership looks like. That it's not about one person deciding to lead, it's about all of us deciding to lead so that we build leaderful companies and leaderful organizations. The 3 things we need to be high performing is we need work worth doing, cultures worth belonging to, and leaders worth following. And we've talked a little bit about the leaders worth following when we've talked about what it means to be a chief. And we're talking about this second thing of starting the fire every day, which takes me to culture, right? And I've sort of shared that gossip, sarcasm, and cynicism create the conditions for people to leave. And what we want to do is we want them to stay and we want them to thrive so that our businesses can go next level, right? So our transformational agendas get delivered across the board. So let's come back to the 3 chief things. So greet with intent. Remember the school and the principal and the headmaster. Start the fire every day. I mixed metaphors then and talked about tsunamis. And the third one, this is really, really tough. Get ready. This is hard. The other 2 are easy. Greeting with intent, easy. Starting the fire every day, easy compared to this one. Forgive with ease. Oh, that's hard. Because to forgive with ease, what we've got to operate as leaders is we've got to operate above the line. Chapter 2 in the book that I suggested you might want to read, this one, Rise Up. And once again, all of my books are digitally free. You can download them, read them, share them with your team. If you get the PDF and there's a chapter that you like, just take that single chapter and share them. A lot of my books are written with like 1,500 words to 3,000 words a chapter, really easy read, 5 or 10 minutes. There's a diagram always, some sort of model that makes sense of it. And then there'll be 5 or 6 questions. And so what you can do is share the paper. You don't have to share the whole book. Like just take chapter 12, share it, maybe draw the diagram next time you're in a meeting, and then walk through the questions. And just what you'll be doing as a result is creating an environment where you're sharing knowledge and insight. And if you want to be rated as the most inspirational person I've ever worked for, it's not just what you've done. It's not just the results you have. That's a given. No, that's a given. You should have results and you should get great things done. You'll be rated as the best boss I ever had because of who you've been to me. It's not what you're doing or what you're having, not your results you have or the things you do. That's a given. That's the price of entry to be at the level you're all at. But it's who you're being to me. So in this book, chapter 2, I talk about the line of intent. And I'm not going to go into it too much. There's a lot of leadership maturity frameworks, Lovinger and Cook, Wilbur, Hawkins, Fowler, Webster. They've all done work which basically shows you that leadership evolves in stages, right? And the references are in my book. So if you want to get into this or it makes sense, you can. But I just want to talk about it at its simplest level. There's this line, and we know whether we're above it or below it. We really do. If I said to you, in your personal health at the moment, are you above the line or below the line? And I got you to do thumbs up, thumbs down, you could totally nail that for me. All right, if I said in your personal wealth, from a money point of view, how are you doing? Thumbs up, thumbs down. You above the line, you below the line. Primary relationships. right? Pick your 3 or 4 primary relationships. In each of them, let me ask you the question, how's that going? Is it above or below the line? So do you get that? Like, it's so easy. I don't need to tell you where the line is, and I don't need to judge whether your health, your wealth, or your relationships are above or below the line. It's the same with leadership. In any given moment, I can tell whether you're leading above or below the line. And the way I can tell is I ask you, I go, are you above the line right now? Or are you below the line? And you'll often sort of go, yeah, no, I was a bit below the line in that meeting. And I go, why were you below the line? Oh, my energy was down. I was cranky because of, and I didn't handle that person's interaction very well. So you know when you're below the line. And there's a lot of study about the levels and stages, and stage 1 and stage 22, and they give them colors almost like a Vedantic chakra system or something like that. And I'm like, no, come on. It's like, we don't need all of that. We just need to go, are you above or below the line? And you are below the line when fear is driving what you do, anger is driving what you do, or pride. And this always surprises people because they want to go, no, pride's a good thing. I go, that's right on the line. Now, pride in others, great thing. Pride in self, not so much. And that's right on the tipping point. We get above the line with courage, with acceptance, and with love. And I don't mean touchy-feely love, because a lot of people say, what's love got to do with it? I go, absolutely everything. Because if your orientation is built around a belief that the best version of you, so here's when you lead best. When the best version of you speaks to the best version of me, that's you leading in a human-centric way that's inspired. That's you being a chief that I want to follow, a leader worth following. I was really inspired. I did a study trip to New Delhi. I went to Mumbai, I went to New Delhi, and I got to meet with Sugata Mitra. Now, Sugata is extraordinary. He sets up a thing called the School of the Cloud and self-organized learning environments. So this is a picture of him. He's got a TED talk you can check out, which is super awesome. And it's be a famous story for many of you because he basically runs a computer science school, but he's the head of pedagogy at New Delhi University. So pedagogy, if it's a word you haven't heard, it's the study of teaching children, like pediatric medicine. So, and andragogy is the study of teaching adults, right? So he is actually the professor of both andragogy, which is adult learning, and pedagogy at New Delhi University. And we got the opportunity to attend his school because he's quite famous for putting a hole in the wall of his IT school and turning this computer, and you can see based on the computer, as an audience, you'd all be able to pick the age of this computer. Can you see the trackpad off to the side? And he connected this where kids who don't speak English, can't go to school, have access to this internet-enabled computer. And he's been doing this, he did this as an experiment. In under 8 hours, the kids are surfing the net. And people go, how is this possible? How is it possible that the kids are surfing the net? There's no way. And someone says, I reckon one of your IT students walked down, showed them how to do it, and the kids are just modeling it. He says, you know what? That is highly possible. So he goes out to a remote village where the kids only speak Tamil, and there is no chance that one of his students is going to come across. Now, these kids can't, like many of you know, the challenge of education, such a big country, India. But one of the problems is so many different languages. We can't get enough teachers, and we can't get enough curriculums, and we can't get the curriculums in the local language. So it just becomes almost impossible. So he sets up a computer. This is what it looks like. These are internet-enabled kiosks. So he puts all these computers in. He's been doing this for over a decade. And these kids who can't go to school just play on the computers. When he set the first one up, and I'll finish on this story, Mukesh. When he set the first one up, the kid said, what is it? And he said, I can't tell you. I don't know. Because it's an experiment. He didn't want to skew the results. They said, can we touch it? He said, absolutely. The kids go, what if we break it? And he goes, there's no problem, no responsibility. And he goes away for 12 weeks. He comes back and the kids are surfing the net. He showed us this video and it had subtitles, but I didn't need it. There's little boys typing and he's really pissed off. And he's angry. He looks around and he goes, we need a faster processor and I need a better mouse. This is a kid that has never seen a computer 12 weeks before. 100 days before that, he didn't know what the internet was. And this kid is surfing the net. And he goes around and he says, so what are you doing? And they're all playing on games and things like that. He says, so it seems to me like you're just playing. And they go, yep. And you're not learning anything. And they go, no, we're just playing. And then this little girl pipes up, and we're in this lecture hall in his campus there in New Delhi. And this little girl says, she goes, because sadly her mother had passed away with cancer recently, which explains her impetus to learn. But she turns around and she goes, I don't think we've learned anything, except that maybe the improper replication of a DNA molecule leads to cancer. This girl is not in a school. This girl is surfing the net. This girl does not have textbooks, does not have privilege. One of the things that Sugatra does is he gets retired teachers out of generally anywhere and gets them to Skype once a week with these kids. So the term of endearment, of course, not biological, could be auntie or uncle. And the aunties for the school in the cloud, if you check out School in the Cloud, you get this story. They are only allowed to do three things. They zoom into the kids, and the auntie is only allowed to go, what are you working on? And the kids go, blah, 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 blah. The second step in the auntie manual is say something encouraging. And I'm going to finish with the fact that encouragement, putting courage into others, right? Encouragement is your superpower as a human-centered leadership. So what are you working on? Say something encouraging, ask them what they're going to work on next. That's all the aunties do, because they don't speak the language. They don't have the textbooks. There is no curriculum. They can't teach them. But this has been going for over a decade. And as a result of the School in the Cloud, Sugata and the aunties and the kids have got kids to university level with no school, no textbook, no curriculum. And you go, what have they got? A digital transformation. Yeah. Getting these computers into these environments. A digital learning transformation, but they've been able to add a human encouragement element. So saying something encouraging, guess what? They've even in the auntie manual, you can download it. The most encouraging thing to say. This is what the aunties are taught to say. That's amazing. And the kids go, fantastic. But this is the kicker. This is the science of Sugata, what he's discovered. The leader changes their status. Here's how it works. This is how you encourage. That's amazing. I couldn't have done that when I was your age. And it turns out that that shifting of status is all it needs for a person to have the agency and to self-author their future. And little kids in remote villages where they only speak Tamil and the people that work for you thrive on encouragement. If you're going to step into your chiefing as a leader, you're going to greet with intent, you're going to start the fire every day, and you're going to forgive with ease. And we know you're the leader when you encourage us, not belittle us. When you inspire us by who you're being, not what you're saying. And that this stuff is the stuff that'll help you win the war for talent. And when you've got talent, you'll win the battle for attention. And when you've got the battle for attention, you're in a good place to win the race to the future. And that's going to take extraordinary leaders like you. It's been an honor and a privilege to be here. I don't know how much time we've got or how tight we are. Thank you, everybody, for the patience with whatever our little technical glitch was, but we got there and it didn't matter at all. Mukesh, I'll invite you back in and we can riff a bit, or you can send me on my way. You're the master of everything we're doing at the moment.
So maybe, thanks a lot, Matt, for sharing your perspective. I think I'm always amazed at the way you're able to explain these concepts. By the way, I'm right now reading the book called The Above the Line. As you
Beautiful. Beautiful.
So two questions in various forms that have come up in the chat. So one is around motivation and one is around influence. As leaders, how do we motivate people around us, either to be better leaders or to do the best that they can? Number one. Number two is how do we influence people in terms of what they are doing or how they could do or be better? So probably similar, connected, but those are the two.
Yeah. Well, I think the key thing is we create a subject-object separation with the people we lead, which gives us the functional accountability conversation. You did or you didn't do what you needed to. And motivation is, I think, an old-fashioned idea, because I think motivation is this idea that I can motivate you to action. When in fact, all I can really do is create the conditions in which you act. So rather than motivation, I reckon a better thing to focus on is how can I increase agency? How can I increase someone's locus of control? Viktor Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And in it, he's a Holocaust survivor who was in Auschwitz. And he wrote that book. It's like it's been number one since it was published in the top 10 of the US Library of Congress. And books in the top 100 disappear all the time. But this one has stayed and it's been prevalent because it introduced a concept called locus therapy. And the basic phrase is a person's degree of happiness is directly proportional to their degree of control. So whenever you take a subject-object separation and believe that you can motivate another, I reckon what you're in is this weird transaction of bait and switch, this weird transaction of carrot and stick, of desire and despair, and the hunt for accountability is a gap you'll never fill. If your question you're asking yourself is, how can I increase the agency for this person? Then you'll become inspiring. And one of the acts you can take is just be lit up. Just find stuff that you find interesting and share it with people. And take that mentoring role that the elder chiefs take. Step yourself up into that mentoring, not condescendingly teaching them everything you know, but creating the conditions where they blow you away. You know what I mean? Like where you get to go, that's amazing. I couldn't have done that when I was starting out. And if you run that process, amazing things will happen. The second part of your question, what was that towards again? Remind me.
Influence. So one was motivation, the other was influence.
I think influence is very much about being able to not just communicate a possibility for where we're heading, but to be able to map the milestones of achievement from here to there. And it's classic S-curve gap analysis. Invariably, the moment of influence is when what people are doing is no longer working. So if I was to show you that here, there's a classic S-curve model that Sigmoid, a mathematician, used to talk about, and we all know this. And it's this idea that things get better, then they plateau, and quite often what happens is they then get worse. And so here and here are the two inflection moments on this as an idea. In the book, The Paradox of Choice, Charles Handy, it's about 20 years old as a book. He introduced this S-curve as an idea. And I think influence is about helping people realize, Marshall Goldsmith wrote a book on this as well. What got you here won't get you there. So invariably what happens is everyone's doing great. They're getting fantastic results. They know what to do. Our business is growing. We then hit this plateau period. And effectively, the things that we're doing here quite often stop us and hold us back. And for those that have ever been in a startup, you'll know that the early days of a startup are very, very heady because it's like everybody can get amazing things done. And then you stagnate as you hit a certain scale. And to break to that next level, quite often what you need is things like a digital transformation to help take you right up to that next game. But they're running an analog mindset. And you've got to switch them into some new possibility. So influence is fundamentally about handling those moments where what used to work no longer does, and we now need to develop new ones. So you're going to hear people talk about new paradigms and shifting paradigms. It's that. And the trick to that is context. Is being able to create a new context. And I don't mean a situational context. And that's something maybe for another talk, because you'll get me going on that. That'll be another 2 hours and I'll never shut up, Mukesh.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Matt. I think one of the things that I've heard you say multiple times, and which I would like to close with today, is in order to be inspirational, you need to be inspired. I think that is where a lot of us need to work on ourselves. Find what inspires us. And once we are inspired, I think the possibility and the potential that we become inspirational to others, of course, by doing everything else that you've shared today in your talk, is much better. So with that, thank you so much for
Thanks,
your time
Mukesh.
and your insights.
Thanks, everybody, for your time as well. Great to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Church, for such a motivational session. We are truly all leaders.